So basically, what we spoke about before, right, is we spoke about the different gradations with respect to what an individual can attain. One of those being a very complex level, being that of the Beinoni, which is something that Rava said that he was, and we questioned how Rava, a sage in the Talmud, could possibly say that he himself is a Beinoni when we know that a Beinoni means the middle ground, the intermediate man, the person who has half good sins and half bad sins, right? So we the whole half of it we essentially question what do these titles mean? What is the righteous man who only knows good, a righteous man who prospers, right? So and a righteous man who suffers, an intermediate man, a wicked man who knows good, and a wicked man who suffers. What do these titles mean, right? And we said essentially they're not titles that refer to the quantity of deeds that make up one person, meaning however much is good and however much is bad, but rather it's a borrowed term that's placed upon a judgment, right? So when you're in a court, right, and you're deemed not guilty, that's not guilty based on all the things that have come to light, right? So in that respect, like you're 51% good and you're and you're 49% bad, you're a tzaddik. You're righteous. But what the Alter Rebbe's chiddush, what his kind of new idea that he's coming to explain here is that these are just borrowed terms and they come to mean something by far greater, and that's related to the intrinsic properties of the individual themselves. And what that means is that the Beinoni, right? So when a Beinoni, when somebody sins, right, they're considered completely wicked up until the point when they do repentance, and then they're fully good. So at what point in time could somebody be considered a Beinoni, right? That was a big point that we thought about. What so at what point physically could he be considered an intermediate man if once he committed a transgression, he is evil, and then when he repented, he is good. So there's no middle point, right? There's no like gradient at which it returns to like intermediate, then back. No. So the idea is that he mistook himself as this title because he didn't even have he didn't even do the transgression of not learning Torah. We're missing the things of Torah. So, but primarily, the Alter Rebbe says, okay, so how can we understand this? How can we understand this? We can understand this by espousing the anatomy of the soul, the way the soul is comprised in the body, and that is how we can then elucidate what these categories come to explain and what they come to mean, and not in just borrowed terms. Because, as we know, we said a complete tzaddik, a complete righteous person, that's a person whose evil inclination is completely nullified and gone within him. Right? A righteous man who suffers, he still has the inclination, he still has the it's alive, but it's unvocal, it's nonverbal, it has no implication in his life whatsoever. It just exists as something that's nullified to the majority, which is the nefesh elokish, the good soul. Right, the Beinoni, right, then we say, is one that's judged by both, right? He's judged by both sides. However,
the in-betweener.
Yes, the in-betweener. However, he doesn't commit any sin, right? So he's judged by both. He has both kind of voices, the angel and the devil, both on each side. But he doesn't come action that is evil, but he only does good. But he's still considered the Beinoni because he has these two potentials latent within him. The wicked one who suffers, the wicked one the wicked one who knows good. That's the wicked one who has a majority of this wicked potential within him, but his goodly potential, this potential for good, this potential for the propensity of doing goodness and kindness still exists and exerts itself to the point where he actually does do good things. And then the evil guy, that's evil, full evil, is the diametric opposite of the full righteous person, right? So his wickedness takes reign. So he's evil to the core. That's there's no returning.
The Russia who is like only his only goal is like he doesn't do anything, doesn't do tshuva, doesn't do any of those good things, right? But there's no one that's actually or Rasa, right? Like no one. Is there anyone that you?
Well, there for sure are. Like, I don't know. I'd say like maybe Hitler, but that's something, maybe Stalin. But essentially, people who are driven by this by a full. They're. Have you ever seen American Psycho?
Yeah.
So there's a point in which he's like he controls himself, right? He controls his habits. And he's like, he knows, like, this isn't socially acceptable. I really shouldn't murder this person. And he says things in his head, but they're not real. And then at a certain point, it goes from delusion to action. And he starts maybe talking some things that people seem out of place. But then finally he commits an act. And once he commits that act, he becomes kind of consumed by that act. And that act becomes him. And then he's fearful for himself because he's driven by something that isn't himself. Right? And that's this idea of being wholly evil, in my opinion, in my estimation. Yeah. So that's basically what we talked about. But then what we said, okay, what we ended off is we said that the souls, there's two types of souls. The first one, by the non-Jews, comes from Klipa. By the Jews comes from Klipa Snega, which is a neutral soul. Now. There was a question. The question is, how can the question that we left off last on, which was, why did we say that by non-Jews this soul power is self-serving? It's because it's not self-serving in the egoistic sense. That's what the answer Robert Jacobson gave, but rather it's self-serving in the sense that it's nation oriented, it's social order oriented. It's not with respect to the greater power that is God. Right, so it's not like Allahu Akbar. Sorry, but you get my point, right? So but by a Jew it's a different sourcing, right? Because the onus of responsibility is not for himself. It's altruistic to a greater extent beyond the anthropomorphic state of himself. And so now we're at chapter 2. That first soul is the animal soul. That animal soul is the one that vitalizes the body, the blood, the soul. It is the commonality amongst all animals, and it constitutes the characterization by which we have our personality, whether we're stingy, whatever, right? It has that makeup. The second soul, however, that is the second uniquely Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. So the second uniquely Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. It's truly a connection with Him. From that verse, where, right in Genesis, where God blew the soul of life into Adam, blew the breath of life into Adam. That's part of him, because that breath is a part of God, and He blew within man that gave him that soul, that animation. So a part of God is a quotation from the scripture. The Alter Rebbe adds the words truly to stress the literal meaning of these words, for as is known, some verses employ hyperbolic language. For example, the verse describing a great and fortified cities reaching into the heavens is clearly meant to be taken figuratively, not literally. Right? So some things are just as, to write a good book. But this is more than just to write a good book. It's to actually tell you what it is in fact, in point of fact. It's a part of God literally. Right? In order that we should not interpret the phrase "a part of God above" in a similar manner that the Alter Rebbe adds the words "truly," thus emphasizing that the Jewish soul is quite literally a part of God above. As it's written, as it's written concerning Adam, whose soul was a comprehensive one, and the neshama klalit, a clean soul, right, a pure soul, in that it contained all the particular souls of the subsequent generations. His soul was the archetypal soul, containing all souls within it, right? So every aspect of humanity with respect to soul powers are offshoots from that first soul, which was Adam's soul, and it was a pure soul, and it was a part of God, right? And he blew it. This is the verse from the Bible, and he blew it into his nostrils of soul of life. And as we say in prayer concerning the soul of every individual Jew, you blew it into me. The significance of the verb to blow, right? The importance of the reason. Why does it say just to blow? Because we know in the Torah, these words are not just simple. They're not just because God did this act of blowing. But first of all, God is not a person, right? So we could have said placed in. We could have said, abracadabraed into the body, spawned, right? We could use any manner of words, but blue, it connotes a certain idea, right? And that's what we're going to discuss now. But but fundamentally what we're discussing is the origin of the second soul. What is the second soul? As it relates to the infusion, so the significance of the verb to blow as it relates to the infusion of the Jewish soul is now explained. The Kmoshakata Bazar and the Nafach Metachia, Nafach Pirush Metachiosa, Upimiyasa. It is written in the Zohar, he who blows from within him. So somebody who blows, who exhales, right? So take a deep breath. Yoga, you breathe out, it comes from the innermost part of you. That is to say, from the inwardness, from his innermost being. For it is of his inward and most vitality that man emits through blowing with force. Right, when you work out, right? If you work out, right, you're bench pressing, right? You use your breath in order to push the most weight that you can, right? You exhale as you bring down, and or am I wrong with that? Am I right with that?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, right? But that's the part, right? Because it's all of you that you're putting out within it, and you see this with yoga as well.
But what is that exactly translating to here? What does that mean?
What does that mean? So right now we're creating a narrative. We're creating a story. We're explaining what this soul is, where it comes from, and what it means in our connection with God, right? So the other part of the other soul we said was from Sitra Achra, was from the hind part of God. The other soul, the vitalizing soul, that was this lower level, this on a hierarchy. This is this one that's kind of left over. It's just baseline needs to like on your iPhone, you have certain things that are just power up, right? But you have other things that are more nuanced and more complex that have higher power reserves, and they're not just simple, right? I don't actually know if that's true, but basically that's the point. So that first soul that we talked about is very primal, and it comes from this primal level of how God distributes and diffuses this energy to thereby produce that soul power. This other level of soul power that we're talking about comes from the innermost part of God himself, right? So it's not this roundabout method of giving you something, right? It comes from the very thing that is the thing, the essence of it, right? And when we talk about who we are, and I'll ask you, Will, point to who you are. Point to yourself. Who am I, right? Where your lungs are, where your solar plexus, right? That's who you are. I think it'll come hold on to that idea. I think it'll come to outline something. So now, blowing tires a person much more quickly than speaking, as readily observed, requires. So when you get more tired by blowing tires than you are by speaking, this is an evidence as to why this requires more force. Hence, the fact that the metaphor of blowing is used to describe God's implanting the Jew's soul in his body signifies that the soul originates in the innermost aspect of godliness. That the Jew is rooted in God's innermost and essential being is indicated further by the designation of the Jewish people as God's children, whose soul originates in his thought. Just as the child stems from his father's brain, as Alter Rebbe explains presently. This idea of inwardness, of breath, of breathing the soul into Adam, is connected with this inward notion, in this inwardness that is connected with breath, that is part of God's most inwardness. Meaning, then, so connecting these ideas is that the soul of a Jew is connected to the very innermost part of God himself, like a son to his father. Those are the analogies that we created. So too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. So too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. The Jew has his source in divine thought. In divine thought, the innermost level of godliness. All other created beings, even angels, are rooted in and created by divine speech. Speech is external in comparison with thought. So, in general, the whole world, right, was created by speech. Speech is vibrations, and Shar Yichud the Emunah talks about the different ways that God's speech kind of alternates with one another. There's different substituted properties that produce an efflux of energy that create existence as such, right? But the soul is different from that. Everything is created through speech, right? Everything is created through speech. But speech is a secondary kind of property to that of thought. So the way the hierarchy of events, I didn't want to say actions, but the hierarchy of events is thought, speech, and action. Thought being the highest, right? Because when you speak, right, before you speak, there is a near infinite amount of possible words that you can use to describe whatever it is that you're thinking, right? And there is no end to that, right? But that all exists in your thought, and even that's limited by speech because you're really not necessarily thinking in speech, right? But thought is this near infinite thing. But once you condense thought into something that's actualizable, that's speakable, that's then another limited format. But that's still more nuanced and more complex than something that can be put down into physical action, right? So just because I want to create a Tesla doesn't mean, even if I can explain it fully how it would work, doesn't mean I actually can, because putting it down to action, and that's a lot more limited, a lot harder. It's constrained by a lot more external things than I can control. But the idea is that when God created the world through speech, right? So the soul itself comes from a deeper level, which is from the thought, and not from the speech. That's what I want to hammer home. Make sense? Did I go on too long for that?
Sorry, what was created from thought rather than speech?
The soul.
The soul. Okay.
No
problem. Okay, quick intermission. No, but that's actually like it's a difficult thing to comprehend. Is like kind of the nuances between what's the differences between thought and speech here, and how it kind of and how it differentiates in between. So like what is creation, or what is thought, or what is the implications of thought rather than the implications of speech, and how that impacts one another. Right? That's what I'm thinking.
Well, they're all really applicable, right? But here, what we're trying to hammer home is that this creation of the soul itself ranks higher than the creation of the world, because even the creation of the angels, they rely on the spoken truth, on the spoken potential, right? So God's speaking the world into existence. But on a higher level, that's this breath, that's this thought, because the breath is connected to the thought in this respect, and that is this higher level, and that's the source and the root of the soul itself. So what we're laying down is we're saying that the soul stems from a higher level than the source that creates creation itself. It's not that there's different sources, there's different mechanisms. So just like you could think about drinking a cup.
Yeah.
Thinking about drinking a cup of water, talking about drinking a cup of water, and actually doing the act of drinking a cup of water. Those are three kind of exactly the same things, but separated by innumerable affordances. Because but when you think about about drinking the water, right? Mm-hmm. You're thinking about drinking water. You can think about drinking the water upside down, left side, right? Like how in any number of ways that are allotted to you within this confined space. It's a game essentially, right? Mm-hmm. But it's near unlimited, right? So that's a high level, right? talking about it, also you can also talk about it, but then once you level it down through speech, some things work, some things don't. It becomes more limited, more constrained to the situation. But when you actually go to do it, then that relates to what your actual physical capabilities. Like in VR, you can't necessarily do something that you can do a lot of things that you can't necessarily do in real life. And so the point is that those sources are they're categorically higher than one another on a spiritual plane. And with God himself, these we're talking about these things and they're not like real. They're real with respect to like how you and I can discuss them in terms of thought, speech, and action, how we perceive them and how we do them. But in terms of God, they're way different. But the fundamental point is that where, like in Genesis, it says God spoke the world into creation. He said, "Let there be light." All right, but then it says, "And God breathed the breath of life into man." Right, He breathed the breath of soul. That was an action that God did. That was from the innermost part of Himself. That is different from the process of creation as a whole, because the process of creation as a whole stemmed from this speaking. So, so too, allegorically speaking, have Jewish souls risen in the divine thought. The Jew has his source in the divine thought, the innermost level of godliness. All other created beings, even angels, are rooted and created in and created by divine speech, right? So that, as we were just talking about, speech is an external in comparison to thought, right? Because like you're speaking, right? When I talk to you, I speak. I can't return my speak. It's not my speech back to me. It's gone. As written regarding the Jewish nation, Israel is my firstborn. Banim otam la'Hashem la'hechem. And concerning Jews as individuals, you are children unto God your Lord. You are children unto God your Lord. Pirush k'mo shehaben nimshach memoach ha'av. That is to say, the significance of the Jews being called God's child is that just as a child is derived from its father's brain, his inner and essential being, right? So just as a child is derived from his father's brain, from his very essence, from his foundation, his fundamental essence. So too, to use an anthropomorphism, is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. Right? The Alter Rebbe now takes this concept a step further, deriving from God's thought and wisdom actually implies that it derives from God himself, as he goes on to explain. So this becomes a little bit more complex, and this becomes where it's a little bit harder to grasp. But basically, the whole thing is applicable. Why? Because you have to understand yourself in order to learn to navigate yourself. We also understand, basically, you understand it, like for just outside, something that is, I guess, an interesting concept to me, and something that I enjoy, is that when you're met with a struggle, this idea that our souls stem from the innermost aspect of God, that God blew the breath of life into Adam. I think that's a heavy topic, right? Because it's a heavy concept, because you're connected inexorably to God himself, the infinite, right? So to what extent can't you do something? Well, to no extent, because you're connected to this infinite divinity. And so I think that that's hyper applicable. To use the anthropomorphism is the soul of every Jew derived from God's thought and wisdom. The Alter Rebbe now takes this concept a step further. Deriving God's thought and wisdom actually implies that it derives from God himself, as he goes on to explain. Di'iu hakim v'lo b'chokhma yediyah, ela hu v'chokhmata echad. For he is wise. God possesses the equality of wisdom, but not with a wisdom that is known to us created beings, because he and his wisdom are one. God is wise. He possesses the quality of wisdom. But this wisdom that God possesses is not a wisdom that we are privy to, that we understand, that we have the capacity to comprehend. Why? Because he and his wisdom are one. He and knowing are one. The Rambam goes in, and as Maimonides writes, he is knowledge and simultaneously the knower, who knows and comprehends through knowledge. So he is knowledge and simultaneously the knower, who knows and comprehends through knowledge, and he is that which is known. God is also the subject of the knowledge and comprehension, as Maimonides concludes. So there's 3 stages here. So this means that God's wisdom and comprehension are totally different from man's, right? The way that we kind of acquire knowledge is different from the way in which God does, obviously. But one is that there's a person's soul, the knower, the possessor of knowledge, B, the power of intellect and comprehension. So this is it's interesting. I was arguing about this with somebody, but essentially it seems to be that there's this agentic form of a person, this person, the soul, or the soul power that knows, the knower. This is like the agent, right? And then the power of intellect and comprehension. Then there's like a kind of like a second gear of being, like a phenomenological existence that produces a form of understanding that then transcribes or positions that not positions, but adds that new knowledge into the schema of being for that person, right? Into the knower, right? So that now the knower knows new things by virtue of him knowing new things. Make sense? Right? And then
God can't learn new things, right?
Everything is within God. Right? That's why this thing. Here we have 3 separate processes by virtue of here we have 3 separate processes, the way in which we learn things.
So when Adam took a bite of the apple, God wasn't like, I guess yeah, they could fall for the bait or like anything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Like, did he learn like, humans are like that?
Well, this is the thing. To what extent is knowing? Because the way we see things is generally like linear, and that whatever choice we make.
No, it doesn't have to be linear, because if you think, like, let's say, okay, God made Adam and Eve, made like the whatever it's called, the garden. He's like, okay, it's perfect, right? So he knows baseline about humanity. But then as soon as Eve or whatever, Adam takes a bite of the apple, it's not like a linear thing. It was like a huge spike because it completely changes.
So to that is what I'm saying is essentially I believe that there is multiple realities in which this occurred. I think we live in the one in which this is the ripple effect of our existence. But I think God sees every possible reality, right? But the freedom of choice that lies in us to choose and create and form our reality.
So there's another reality where Adam did not eat it?
Don't know. Maybe. Possible.
Okay.
That's my the reality that we know is this one. If there's another one, I think
I wonder,
maybe.
was he like stumped?
And
was he like, oh, really?
Well, like he could have, right? But because it's kind of like these are all the options. There's like probability, right? It's like AI. I don't know. Let's say Havdil, like to separate, but probabilistically, it's like you put you put a machine into something with X amount of affordances. 10% this way, 20% the other way. What's the probability it's going to choose X or Y? You can say likely it'll probably do this, but what if it does other thing? Well, it's like, oh shit, I was wrong. But still, basically what it could do. What it chooses is a different story. That's the mutually exclusive aspect. We made an analogy. We took the analogy. We said that the Jewish soul arises from the brain of the father, right? Like a child. From the brain of his father, right? We said we use this anthropomorphism, but we said, and this is which is derived from God's thought and wisdom. We said this idea of God's thought and wisdom is different than the way that we conceptualize it. Why? Because for He is wise. God possesses the quality of wisdom, but not with the wisdom that is known to us created beings. No, because He and His wisdom are one. Because both He and the wisdom are one. It's like the MacBook knows everything about MacBooks.
Right, like what? That he knows everything about himself, and thus he knows everything about us.
Yeah, So there's nothing more to be known because everything exists within him, right? So because knowledge in general, right? For you to learn something, you need to learn something that's external from you to learn it. In order for you to learn Tanya, you had to have first not ever known Tanya to learn Tanya. Tanya has to exist external from you. You then have to learn that Tanya, bring it into being. So you're now the knower. You're the person who wants to know something. You're using a process of, let's say, attention to bring that knowledge into being, right? And then you're learning that external thing that is Tanya into yourself and learning it and then acquiring that knowledge. So those are the three processes that exist on a human level that on a celestial level with respect to Hashem, these don't exist because he is all of that thing. And we're gonna go further. We're gonna explain further because it's not just that clear. Because this is at a certain level. Because we can only express this nature of understanding, this nature of rationality to God at a level where God is already contracted from a never-ending light. And we're gonna go into that now. So this means that God's wisdom and comprehension are totally different from man's. Okay? So in human comprehension, there are three separate, distinct components. The person's soul, the knower, and possessor of knowledge, the power of the power of intellect and comprehension, the knowledge, or so the power of knowledge, by which a person knows, and C, the subject of the knowledge, the known, which adds a law in Mishnah or discussion in Gemara, which is apprehended and known. Concerning God's wisdom, however, Maimonides states, the Rambam states, he is knowledge, the knower, and the known, with respect to Hashem. God is the means of comprehension and the knowledge, and at the same time is he who understands, the knower, and is also that which is understood, the known. The main takeaway to understand here is that the way, the nature of acquisition of knowledge by God is different than for us, because we acquire knowledge because knowledge exists externally from us, apart from the things that we know, meaning, I know my hands, I know the things that I was born with, but as I interact with the world, I know more and more about the world, right? And there's processes of cognition that I employ in order to gain more knowledge and kind of facilitate that, or not facilitate, but add that into my general worldview and create a holistic understanding and interpretation of the world and the things that I know in the world. Right. Whereas with God is omnipresent, omniscient. He knows everything. He is
already. Yeah.
So everything exists within him. So these deconstructions don't mean anything by God.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good explanation. That makes way more sense. But it says here, God is the means of comprehension. What does that mean? Does that mean that he is comprehension in the way, like whenever we comprehend something, that's through him? Is that what it's
yes. So basically, there's a level. So why do we understand some of the commandments? Why we understand some of the commandments is because God let us understand some of the commandments. Why should we not murder? Well, it would seem obvious that we shouldn't murder because murder is bad, and it's obviously not okay to murder somebody. But that's probably not the exact reason, right? So the idea is like we can rationalize why God wants us to do a certain thing or not do a certain thing, but the conduit by which we produce that or we gain that understanding, that is what God affords to us. Maimonides continues, and this is not within the power of any man to comprehend clearly. See, so just even the fact that we're starting to understand this, you see, we're on such a high level, you understand? Because this isn't something that we're meant to even understand. As it is written, can you find and understand God by searching? And is it written, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, says God, and consequently your human thoughts cannot possibly comprehend my thoughts. Since his wisdom is one with God himself, as has been shown, it follows that the Jewish soul, which stems from divine wisdom, as stated above, actually derives from God Himself. So because God's wisdom is one with Himself, okay. So because God's wisdom is one with Himself, and the soul stems from within God's wisdom, because it stems from the innermost aspect of God Himself, which is His thought. And God, as we just said, is not different. His wisdom is His thought. He is His wisdom. Right? So because of that, the soul actually derives from God Himself. So many Jewish philosophers reject.
It's interesting because it says, and consequently, your human thoughts cannot possibly comprehend my thoughts. That was very thought-provoking to me, because does that then mean we cannot possibly comprehend ever like his thoughts? Like we won't be able to ever comprehend anything that he is ever, it's like
it's a game. The only thing that works within a game is what you allow to work within the game, and God created the game. It's like,
okay, I see. It's like the parameters of our understanding.
You can't play Monopoly and Catan.
I see. Okay.
Wait, does God think?
To the extent that we can conceptualize that.
It's like
but basically,
it's outside of our comprehension. That's what you're saying? It's outside of our comprehension. That's all it means.
Yes and no, but basically what we're talking about here currently, this specific extrapolation of the way in which God and His knowledge exists, that is at a specific hierarchical echelon of God, meaning the way in which God transcends into this world. Okay? Mm-hmm. And we're going to explain that directly now. Because why? And this is because this definition of God being the knower, the known, and the wisdom, right? God being all those things in one. Mm-hmm. That was a controversial thing. It was controversial. Why? So many Jewish philosophers rejected Maimonides' description of God as the knowledge, the knower, and the known. They rejected this. In fact, they considered it erroneous to ascribe to God a description of any sort, often even of the lofty level of intellect of which Maimonides writes, inasmuch as description implies limitation, and God is inherently limitless. Right? So the fact that we can even describe this effect or this thing, right, produces a certain limitation. Right. As we said with respect to thought, right? As soon as you ascribe speech to thought, you limit your thought, right? You can have all the colors in your mind, but as soon as you say which color they are, you limit it because, first of all, you may not even have the capacity to understand how many colors there are and what words there are to exist to say it.
Because there's more colors than we can actually comprehend.
Exactly.
And it's like saying that he is within those colors, but when in reality, he's actually outside the colors of what we can conceptualize. In that case, in that sense, that's what I'm understanding.
Exactly. No, exactly. Mm-hmm. So, the Alter Rebbe therefore points out in this note on the Kabbalist, agreed with Maimonides. So this is why. So there seems to be an issue. The Alter Rebbe addresses. He says, I understand that basically a lot of people are going to get triggered by this description of God. So I'm going to put a little disclaimer here. Don't get triggered because this is what it says.
He's like, yeah, he was right, but he wasn't like 100% correct.
Yes, guys, relax, calm down. Yeah. So the qualification that his concept does not apply to God's essence, for his essence, God's essence, his etzem, is truly infinite, even higher than the inscrutable level of knowledge, higher than the level of chachma, right? Because we have there's a hierarchy. It goes chachma bina da'at, chesed gvur tiferet, netzach yisod malchus, right? It's this kind of rung, like a chakra system, right? And chachma, which means knowledge, is the topmost of this rung.
Mm-hmm. Bina.
Yeah, right, and that's Chabad, right? Chabad is chachma bina da'at. So even higher than the inscrutable level of knowledge, and the Maimonides refers to the inscrutable level of knowledge that Maimonides refers to regarding his essence. Those who disagree with Maimonides are correct in maintaining that God cannot be defined in terms of knowledge, since he transcends it infinitely. Only after God's limits the infinite light of his essence through the process of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is this contraction. So the way in which this world is created is through the process of tzimtzum, and that is, as I said before earlier, which is that God created it through kindness, because it's a kindness to contract your energy to the point where something else can exist, that you allow it to exist, like transferring knowledge, right? When you tell somebody about something that you're expert in, you don't tell them about it at the level that you know it now, right? When you talk to somebody about cross-country skiing, you're not telling them about all the things, right? First, you're trying to get them on the skis themselves, or something like that, right? Because that's what they can get, and that's a kindness that you do. And so, in that same way, those are contractions by which we build worlds, and this is the same way in which God builds our physical world. So even higher than this inscrutable love of knowledge, the Maimonides are first regarding his essence. Those who disagree with Maimonides are correct in maintaining that God cannot be defined in terms of knowledge, since he transcends it infinitely. Only after God limits the infinite light of his essence through the process of tzimtzum, which is this contraction, and thereby assumes the attribute of chokhmah, the attribute of wisdom. Only then can it be said of God that he is the knowledge, the knower, and the known. So now, what do we say? So through this level, through this process of contraction by which God contracts his light, his energy, to the point where we are fortunate enough to receive it in a manner that we can perceive reality and live accordingly, right? So before that happens, there's this Or Ein Sof, this never-ending light, this just pure light, okay? Then it becomes contracted first into the first world, which is the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. Then the second world, the world of Bria, the world of Bria, creation. Then the world of Yetzirah, formation. Then the world of Asiya, action. And that's our world. And each of those has these 10 gradients in which God's power kind of decreases in infinite magnitude, in infinite orders of magnitude from one to another. And so it's only once it's become contracted into the level of the world of Atzilut, that's when we can ascribe these attributes to God, and that's why that these arguments, the controversies that were posed by these other Kabbalistic philosophers, they're all for naught. Why? Because it's only once it's at this contracted state. That's this definitional level. Higher than that, yeah. Then there's a real issue.
Yo, I'm tripping about something.
What?
Can you change God's mind?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the only way. So there's no point of praying.
Praying isn't about. What do you think praying is for?
No, like, you know how like some people say like, oh, pray for health. Like, what's it called? What are you talking about? A synagogue? They're like, yo, I remember Moshe would be like, yo, does anybody have any sick relatives? Let's pray for them.
So those are that's different. It's like this perpetual system that's in play that works off ripples. So things that you've done exist and perpetuate themselves into the future. And so they create rifts. So it isn't that you're changing God's mind. What you're doing is you're creating an efflux of energy that can override the current status quo, which would be the illness.
Okay, yeah, so God's mind can't be changed, right?
No. God's mind is a superposition of all things.
Yeah, okay.
It's not like a regular mind. It's not like our.
But also what I just said is in terms of it being a superposition of all things, it's not necessarily it, right? Like it's not it.
Right.
It's how we can conceptualize it in the most confusing way that is the least confusing for ourselves to understand.
Yeah, because I was struggling. Yeah. I'm like, if you can't change God's mind, that means he has to not be like absolute. You know what I mean? Because like, let's say I'm like sitting here and I'm like, please God, like don't kill me right now. That means at this point he now has to think between whether he's gonna kill me or not, and he has to like think about a choice. I don't know. It's actually very. It's like I was like in a huge loop about it. But yeah, if it's completely absolute, then it's actually fine.
It is, yeah. So it is absolute.
What we can comprehend is so minuscule compared to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
overending
Well, yeah,
of all things.
Exactly, right? It's like when you play like what is it, League of Legends or whatever the hell. What, like I don't know. Like
I'm still a recovering addicts.
but you know, whatever. Any of these games where you have like a player in them, right? The player doesn't ask 2 questions about the system of the game, right? The player.
Yeah, but they will.
No.
Eventually.
I guess eventually, right? But at the current state, but they can only venture to ask questions with respect to what's afforded to them.
Right.
Meaning by us,
To
even
what's
in terms of like
It's
we
all-
can
yeah.
Right.
we can only ask questions with respect to our physical reality.
Right. To our understanding. Like, there's even questions that we wouldn't have thought to ask, right? There's probably so many questions that we could ask, but we can't even conceptualize those questions properly to ask them.
Exactly, right? There's a crazy book. It's called Gödel Eshelbach. If Jonathan was here, I'm sure he would know about this book.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much one of those books where it's like, I wrote this book for 700 pages because I couldn't figure out how to say it in one sentence. You know, like Kabbalists have agreed with him that of Atzilus. It goes down through numerous contractions from one into the other, until it contracts into something that is tangible, that is ours. But the idea is that Chochma Bina Das, that Chochma, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Das, wisdom, those things are garments, and they encapsulate the energy. This energy is just like the energy that you plug in from the wall into your phone, right? That the myriad of utilities that you can use on your phone by virtue of the same energy that you plug into the wall, that's the same analogy. The analogy is that this all this energy comes in and it clothes itself into these vessels, and each of these vessels go from one to the other like this, boom boom boom. They contract into something that is, let's say, palatable for the next world. So at that level where it contracts, that's where we can start discussing these nuances with respect to God, with respect to the construction of the universe, to existence, to the soul, to all these things. But before that, when it exists in the world of truth, right? When it exists in the world pre-thought, right? Pre contraction, there's no words for that. There's no discussion of that, because that cannot be discussed, because it does not have garments, it does not have any vessels by which to close it. There's no vehicles that can carry those concepts, because the concepts themselves dissolve within the power of richness that exists at that level. Okay?
Well.
So, through the process of self-limitation called Tzimtzum. Alright? So through this process of contraction, God manifests, or in Kabbalistic terminology, clothes himself. So God clothes itself. His infinite essence, referred to by the Kabbalists as the Ein Sof. So Ein Sof, Ein means no, Sof, end. It's a never-ending life. Ein Sof, the endless, infinite one. In the sphere, which are his attributes. The manifestation occurs first in the Atzilus, specifically in the Chabad of Atzilus. So each of these 4 worlds have this combinatory effect, right? They have Chochmah Bina Dat Chesed Gvur Tiferet Netzach Yisod Malchut, and the first world, beginning of second world. Chochmah Bina Dat Chesed Gvur Netzach Yisod Malchut, next world. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So it's this funnel system that consistently, and between each of these gradients, there's an infinite distance. Now, if Jonathan were here, he would be able to tell us that there are different degrees of infinity related to them. But not higher than Atzilus, not higher than that world, right? So because that was a contention. The people said, you can't talk about God in these concepts. But the Rizal backs up the Rambam and saying that he can. Why can he? Because it's talking about a post-Tzimtzum state, a post-contraction state. Pre-contraction, you have a point. Pre-contraction, we can't ascribe any of these attributes to God. Post-contraction, you can. Because post-contraction allows the vitality not the vitality, allows the development for the conceptualizations of these terms in order to describe Hashem as such.
What's the definition of contraction again?
Contraction is to make smaller, to lessen.
To
Contract.
lessen, to come down. Yeah, right. But how does that
Happen?
have? Yeah.
We'll get there in
Okay.
But the point is, know that it exists as a process. How it exists actually, how it manifests itself on a spiritual level, that we'll get to.
Okay.
But know that essentially what the Rambam is saying, how we can use this form of a description to describe God, is because it's at a post Tzimtzum state, a post contraction state. So accordingly, in terms of the Kabbalistic scale, Maimonides had nothing to say about God except from the world of tilt and down. As explained elsewhere, the Ein Sof, blessed be He, is infinitely exalted over and transcends the essence and level of Chabad. Ad shemahuz v'chinat chochma bina da'at nachshavat kasiya gufniyat etzli yitbarach. In fact, the level of Chabad is regarded as being equally inferior as material action in relation to Him. So even when we're talking about these concepts, in relation to the Ein Sof, in relation to the uncontracted level of God, God as such, God as He is, these things are nothing in comparison to Him. Even though they're so lofty that we're ascribing them such lofty ideals, that God is the knower, the knowledge, and the thing that is to be known about, right? They're all one. They're they're so complex, these ideas, that we ourselves can't even grasp them. But we can only talk about them once they're at a level of contracted understanding. They themselves are as nothing compared to what is actually before that contraction. So, in fact, the level of Chabad is regarded as being equally inferior as material action in relation to Him. Thus it is written, you have made them all with wisdom. Important, right? So it's you have made them all with wisdom. So because wisdom is the first thing, Chochmah. Right? First contraction, Chochmah. You have made them all with wisdom. It's not that you have made them all with wisdom, in the sense that you've made them all, you've thought it through.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what it's saying.
What does it mean, them all? Like, who is them all in this case?
Creation, existence,
all of existence with wisdom.
With wisdom.
That doesn't even make sense.
So you have made them. So one way to think about it is you have made them all with wisdom. You have made them all with wisdom in the sense that when you've created a Lego city, you have made your Lego city with wisdom. The Lego city doesn't have wisdom, but you've put wisdom into it. You've understood that I'm going to put this door here, and if I want this door to be here, then I can't have this door over here because then the door won't open, right? So that's some wisdom added to it, right? There's a level of thinking things through for it to work, right? But that's not what it means here. What it means here is you've made them with wisdom, is you've made them at that level of wisdom, at that contracted spot, at that first point of contraction, which is the level of chokhmah, which is the level of wisdom. That it is through that power of creation that God has made existence with. It is that level.
But that can't be the first thing to start out with. I mean, wisdom makes sense if you've learned from something. So it would have to start with wisdom. That makes no sense to me in that regard. How can you start with wisdom?
But that's your definition of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Because to be wisdom is to be wise, right? Because someone who's wise has wisdom.
You have to have made a failure or something at the beginning, or maybe like you made a mistake and you learned from it and you have wisdom now because of that said failure.
So wisdom, plainly, is a rational attribute. It's an attribute. It's not this. It's not a linguistic term that refers to experience over a long period of time that leads you to know something well and have intuition about it. It's not a Merriam-Webster definition of
that's my
wisdom.
definition.
That's where I get where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this attribute of wisdom, meaning information, like wisdom literally.
Like what is wisdom? Like wisdom in its purest form.
Wisdom in its like everything has wisdom. Everything has something in it that allows it to be indifferentiable from something else.
Then why use the word wisdom? It doesn't make sense. The word wisdom here doesn't make sense. Like you could use the word like creation or thoughts.
So let's read further, right? So you have conceived them with wisdom. You have conceived them all with wisdom. Would seem more appropriate, right? Is that
right? Yeah,
right?
Yeah. That makes more sense.
Right. So you have conceived them all with wisdom. Would seem more appropriate. Conceiving, not making, is surely the proper function of God's wisdom. You have made them with wisdom. In the case, however, that God's wisdom, the highest level within the world, is as lowly as a sia, the lowest level. So this level of chokhmah transcends and exists. He has made them and endowed every single myriad of levels, from the first point of contraction to the lowest contracted level, with wisdom. They all have a component of wisdom. It is not conceived using wisdom, but is that wisdom exists within all these things. And it's like those Russian nesting dolls. Mm-hmm. It consistently decreases into that point, and they all contain that, but to a lesser kind of weighting degree. So it's this idea, right? Because as you said, how did we get here? What was the point of us discussing this? What was the point of us talking about this in general? Because unlike the first soul that we discussed, the second soul that we discuss arises from God's essence, from his innermost essence, which is his breath, which comes from his thought, which is from his wisdom, right? And that's what we were saying. And so when we're saying that Hashem created it with wisdom, why? Because this idea of wisdom is synonymous with God himself.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I see. Okay, I was reading it as you've conceived them all with wisdom, like they themselves have wisdom. But I see now that it's through his wisdom that he conceived. Okay, that makes more sense. I see. That's the thing. My conceptualization was totally reversed.
First of all, it's difficult because these terms that you don't use them in these ways.
Yeah, exactly. I had to go like almost backwards to kind of understand what you were saying here, because and even to read it, because even though it is correct, you made them all with wisdom. I thought of it as you've made them to inherently have wisdom. Like yes. that's in that sense.
But the thing is that this idea of wisdom.
No, but it's not right. It's not right. It's the opposite.
It says right here that it's intentional. You have conceived them all with wisdom would sound more appropriate.
Yeah.
Not making.
Yeah.
Surely the proper function of God's wisdom. You have made them with wisdom indicates, however, that God's wisdom, the highest level of the world, is as lowly as I said. We're looking at wisdom in a different sense here, right? Because God, we only see him as God's wisdom,
God's
because
wisdom.
That's just like what Bobby said, what we can conceptualize. Because God, in his truest form, his infinite knowledge, he doesn't need wisdom. Because why would you need wisdom if you know everything?
Exactly.
That's why God doesn't actually have wisdom. He just appears to have wisdom when he comes down to our level for us to realize.
There is this thing called information, right? Mm-hmm. We can say that everything contains information within it. Mm-hmm. The information of you, the information of you, the information of me, right? Mm-hmm. We can say that information is inexorably connected to our very makeup and our existence, such that if the information that created us were removed, and that means we, like fully, will cease to exist in the space-time continuum. We won't exist if our information, right? So now to connect that back, there is an overarching information that is the holistic information of everything as it is, right? Mm-hmm. So God contracts himself into the information of existence, but God is apart from existence, right? Mm-hmm. Because God produces existence, but he is nevertheless to be mistaken for existence. Mm-hmm. We exist as a dependent of him. Mm-hmm. Now,
Yeah.
God contracts his wisdom into this. That is the information and all information by which we can create, or that, sorry, not we create, but by which creation is created from. So there is gradients by which this knowledge, this wisdom exists, but nevertheless, all the things that we can conceive about at this highest rung of it exist at that echelon of wisdom.
Because that's all that we can. That's all that we can conceive is within that.
But
that
we can't
echelon.
conceive that level, because that level is at the level of Atzilus.
What,
So,
even the contracted?
So there's four. Is there a pen? Okay. So there's four. There's four different worlds. You have. Right. So you have.
Because that which is contracted, I thought, is what our understanding
this is basically we have. So this is the Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof is never-ending light. Okay, this is like the above here, like from here on. There's no. It's like the outer rim in Star Trek. There's no rules there. Okay, fine. But then you have, but this acts as a crown, so that's Keter. And then you have the first world, which is the world of Atzilut. The world of Atzilut is the world of emanation. But the world, each of these worlds have 10 sfirot. 10 sfirot are 10 dimensions. But their dimensions, they're vessels. They receive this downflow of like this is all. So you see this mountain? Yeah. Yeah. So this is all a downflow of light. Okay, so Atzilut is the first world, the world of emanation. It has Chokhmah, so it has Chokhmah, Bina, Dat. So that's wisdom, knowledge, understanding, Chesed, kindness, Gvura, severity, Chesed, Gvura. Tiferes.
How does that? But they don't all relate to one another.
Beauty.
Like, you know.
They're important. I'll explain to you in a second. Tiferes, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes.
Okay.
Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut. This is kingship. Okay. Now, so each one of these is one vessel.
Okay. Oh, this
is
Kabbalah.
Yes,
this? Okay,
this is Kabbalah. This is Kabbalah.
As soon as I saw the circles.
These three are your rational attributes.
Okay.
These are your emotional attributes. Chesed is kindness. Gvura is severity. Tiferes is beauty. It's the humility. It's the fine line between them, right?
Okay.
But they descend, each one of them, and through synergistic kind of a synergistic dance. They're not mutually exclusive. They work in tandem with one another to then contract the life from one world to the other. Now, the next world, Atzilut, then we have the world of Bria. Bria is the world of creation. Bria has also this exact same ladder within it as well. Okay? Then you have the world of Yetzirah. Then you have the world of Asiya, which is our world. And all of them have this exact same ladder. But the point is, at this level is when we can begin discussing what it means for God to have wisdom. And for our wisdom to be in tandem with God's wisdom, or for
From
God,
where our wisdom comes from.
yes, for where God's desire to create, God blowing a breath of life into man, that breath of life being an inward blow, that inward blow being connected to the idea of thought, that thought being connected to the idea of chokhmah, that idea of chokhmah being connected to God himself. That is only at this level once it's contracted from the Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof, the never-ending light. But this then contracts to degree by degree, each of these through myriads, until finally it gets to the world of Asiya, which is our world. There's more. This in chapter 3 we'll discuss this at length, but fundamentally the point that we're bringing down here, is to understand that the soul, this nefesh elokis, this godly soul, this rational soul, is vested in so high a level that it's synonymous with God himself.
So what is this called? What is all this called? Like, this is basically what we're learning. This is what it's talking about entirely, because we've just gotten onto the beginning part about his breath. So like the very beginning. So we've literally started here at the top. That's where we worked from, and then we just worked down. I see.
So it's called the Seder Stalshalos, the order of creation.
The order of creation. Okay, and that's the order of like our thoughts, our speech. This even comes to that.
People are So through Tanya, you learn that you know God by knowing yourself. We're microcosms of God. We have these same things. Chokhmah being a dot, the level of understanding. Chokhmah being a spark, right? So Chokhmah being just a flash of light. You have an idea. For instance, Saturday night comes around. You have an idea. What do you want to do? You don't know, right? But you have some sort of spark, right? You call one friend, you call another friend. Finally, some plans start happening, right? So then the plans start happening. Fine, that's bina. You're refining your plan into existence. Das is knowledge. You know that plan now. Now, once you've refined that spark of you want to do something, you've refined it through the various conduits in terms of talking to your friends. Now you want to go bowling. Now you know that at 9:30 p.m. on a Saturday night you're going to go bowling and you're going to get fungus on your shoes. Okay, so the idea is that those are the intellectual capacities. Now, the other aspects are you have emotional capacities. So in general, you have different ways in which you impact your emotional response to things. So kindness is love. You love something, right? The opposite of love is hate, right?
Yeah.
But that's because
it's animalistic. No, that's the animalistic soul. Is all those emotions, like all the emotional, is animalistic, while these three are the spiritual soul, because it's all through thought, knowledge, wisdom, understanding.
The thing is, very fundamentally, these three are the cool sided token of the psyche. It takes a while to get there, right? It takes a while to elucidate basically a plan, but in terms of actually how it's acting, something happens rapidly right now. How do you respond? Do you respond emotionally? Because if you respond reflexively, let's say you have some sort of defensive mechanism. You
get offended.
Yeah, let's say you wear glasses, right? Somebody throws and today is one of the days you don't wear glasses. Somebody throws a ball at you, right? The ball hits you in the face, and somebody says, "Well, you didn't see it coming," right? You could react. You're probably gonna react like, "What do you think?" You're gonna get really mad, right? But the guy didn't know, right? So if you take into the consideration that the guy didn't know that you wear glasses in general, right? And so that led you to miss your shot. And then you can say, I could be easy on him. I don't have to say it. You can go up to him and say, "Listen, man, I really didn't. It wasn't nice of what you said, whatever." Or you could react instinctively, which is surpassing these three intellectual attributes, just going straight to the emotion and saying, why did you say this? It overrides it. It creates a form of excitement that stems from a different level of these emotional attributes, which seem to be from the world of chaos. The world of chaos and the world of order are in tandem. The world of order is built on the world of chaos. Now, similarly, with this idea of kindness, right? So kindness is good, but you have too much kindness, which is built on the world of chaos, leads to this SHLB socialism type stuff. Why? Because I'm kind. I want you to be good. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be happy. So let me provide all the things that I will provide for you, and you do nothing that I think is out of the that I think doesn't vibe with what I'm saying, and therefore we can have pure kindness, right?
But it doesn't work.
But that doesn't work because that's only pure kindness, and it excludes all the other steps, and all the other attributes. Pure severity, that's communism.
To be fair, we never really tried it right.
Getting back to the now we're getting into the communism. I mean, I think that we're humans also inherently corrupt. Like there'll be someone who wants to take advantage of the system. So if everyone is responsible for taking a fair share, and anyone can say, hey, I'm taking a little bit of extra money out of the pot. Who's to stop them? It's a trust system, which is what communism is. That's why it always fails. That's my breakdown on it.
That's why we need the Scandinavian system.
Yeah, we need the democratic socialism.
Democratic. I like classical liberalism personally.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge libertarian. Like, government should be like.
And modern liberalism is very authoritarian in a sense, where it's like, well, we know what's best for you, and if you agree with us, we'll make sure that everyone agrees.
Yeah.
We'll make sure everyone falls in line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not even like liberalism.
It's not classical liberalism, but it's modern liberalism, which is a weird thing because they're very different.
Yeah.
They're like opposites. It's a weird thing. Anyway.
Oh man, I'm so sorry.
What?
Yeah.
The squiggles.
The squiggles?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I can read in squiggles.
All right, but yeah, basically, fundamental point to take away: the soul comes from Hashem's innermost part, which is from God's thought. That's it.
Fascinating.
That's what we've learned today.
I think that was a really good way to end off as well. Like
This was
what
definitely
comes
a lot
from-
more confusing than the last two chapters.
This one was harder. This one was like far
Because you have
more
to
complex.
you have to build up kind of there's like a linguistic thing, right? Like you obviously don't know these things,
No.
right?
This one just
But
threw
it's-
us in the fire. I felt like this one straight in the deep end because at first in the beginning it starts very slow, very like easy things to comprehend, kind of how it's relatable, how we're starting, why it's happening, and now it's throwing us in the deep end a bit here about
But-
the things that we don't necessarily know about, like this whole graph, whatever.
But
it is. I don't
you'll-
know anything about it. It's
But
like,
you'll come to know because I think in the third chapter it's going to explain it, which is soon. But fundamentally, without knowing even this, the point is that to know that as I said,
yeah.
well, say it.
Okay, this chapter was more about kind of wisdom, understanding. Like it went over Chacham Das. It went over thought, speech, God's thoughts into like the blowing, into the words, into like the action, and kind of the basic understanding of the differential state of all those things. And it's kind of leading us into this point, but it didn't bring us here yet. It's before all this. It's just a level of. It's like this, whatever this is. It's like the very principle of understanding before
I
the
like
understanding. Anyway, that's my interpretation
Benzi?
of it so far.
What do you think?
I'm like half asleep.
Yes, but you
What'd you
went on a rant earlier.
What'd you get? What'd you get? Give me one takeaway. One takeaway. One word takeaway.
Yeah, one takeaway.
One takeaway.
Simple, small. What's your small takeaway from this chapter so far? You can say what I said too. Did you also have the same understanding as I did, or no,
No, I'm just like.
or nothing?
What hit you?
It's like
What hit you?
what hit me. I'm just looking at it like God's like infinite, right? And then He's like breaking it down for us. Like we're kind of just like stupid, but God's like I fuck with you anyways. Like
I like
babying us along, like trying to like we're like a bunch of drunk people, and He's like the sober one.
Alright, guys,
Honestly, I barely even think this is really talking about Hashem. Like it's very like not Like it's not even about. I don't even think it's about that personally. I think it's more just the essence of what our understanding is and our limitations to that understanding. But Bobby, I think you had a really good explanation there, and you really clarified it for me in a sense. At the end, here's my explanation. Boom, clear cut. This is the very fundamental base of thoughts. Before thoughts, it's like where do thoughts come from? It's like where is it originating? And in this case, it's saying, God blew. And it's very like there it begins. God blew.
This topic of God blue is gonna be it's not gonna go away. It's gonna be it's a very kind of permanent theme, and it describes the Torah. It describes the way in which Jews are, the way in which we are. Matthew, you have any stuff that you want to say about stuff?
Yeah. Well, I agree with. Yeah, basically, like there's a certain extent to where like you just won't understand it, to like God's wisdom and stuff, and also, like we only did read like, whatever, like what is it, like 3 pages or 4 pages?
Yeah, something like that.
And like especially from that Parsha class that we did last week, I realized that like the way Jewish, is this a commentary?
No, this is a Bush book.
49.
Yeah, it's like.
This is a compilation of. So essentially, backtrack. The Tanya is a compilation of teachings that have been taught, not all in one place, but the Alter Rebbe compiled them to direct a specific narrative, that is to refine a person.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, like, remember, like we were like, oh, Moses is a bitch. Never mind, he is a bitch, and then never mind again.
Yeah.
And like it only kind of all came together when like we came close to finishing, even though we never even finished. So we'll probably go through that like loop again if we go back to that class. But yeah, so like I don't know, based off like 3 or 4 pages, obviously it seems confusing, but I feel like if we like really read through it all, the questions that we were even asking here would be just answered without us needing to ask them.
Right.
Because we just like took so little in compared to all that's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's why I felt like it was just a base. It was like a very almost convoluted way to say something fairly simple, but it's to say it slowly. It's almost like trying to make sure that you really understand what's going on, even though I would never even understood it unless Bobby like clarified it for me the way he did. Yeah. Even then, through all this, I wouldn't have understood it really unless I had someone or like a mentor with me.
Oh yeah, you definitely need somebody for sure. But
yeah,
it's like when you're watching a movie, like if Bobby already watched like whatever, let's say like Entourage, I'm like, yeah, why is Ari such a douchebag? And you're like, oh, dude, just keep watching, man. I rewatched Entourage like 4 months ago or something.
Did you?
So
I love that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Do you watch Entourage?
No.
It's such a good show.
I remember I saw it. It looked like it was stupid,
It's so sick. It's not
yeah.
stupid at all.
Really?
It's such a good show.
It's such a sick show.
Is it a movie or show?
It's a show, but it's on HBO, so it's like
Okay.
movie quality.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's very good.
Dude, I've watched a few episodes of Seinfeld recently.
I've rewatched Seinfeld like 3 times.
Dude.
I've never watched Seinfeld.
What about Curb?
Oh, I love Curb. Curb's amazing.
If you like
the new
Curb, you'll
season?
probably like Seinfeld.
No, I didn't even finish the new season. Actually, I don't.
Just finished it.
Someone torrented it
They
for
just
me.
had the finale like 2 days ago,
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
or like not a week ago.
Like it's done forever.
No, just the season. I don't know if he's making another one. It's kind of up to him. He's like,
Yeah.
if I feel like it. If I have a good idea, I'll make another one.
Yeah.
Who?
Larry David.
Larry David. He's goated.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah. His humor just resonates.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I feel like that's... Because here's the thing. Jews say things the way they are. They just say them. They're just like...
Just
Shut up.
unfiltered, yeah.
Yeah, they just say them. Like, you walk in...
Yeah. It's like, fuck your feelings,
Literally,
Like,
fuck your feelings. I don't care. I deserve this.
Yeah. But then but almost like, fuck your feelings, but almost like a roundabout way of doing it, or like a way to like make themselves then sound like righteous, or like in some way. I always find that the Jews say it like in a either an eloquent way or like a So sometimes maybe it's dependent on the Jew.
No,
I don't know.
you're right. Sometimes it's like
It's
you know what I
dependent on the
mean?
Jew. It's the
Depends
same
on-
way with
yeah.
like the person, man.
Yeah,
Some people
yeah.
will beat around the bush. Some people will be like, "Go fuck yourself."
Yeah, but they all have that thing in common where in some way they're just like straight to the point. You know?
Yeah.
Like yeah. In some way that they're just like straight up like Larry David, you know, Larry David and his thing like. But Larry David's always trying to make himself in the right, even though he's so selfish. You know, he's like almost trying to look righteous, or like smart or educated. But in the end of the day, he's just like he doesn't give a shit about anyone else. So he's just like.
You white, you white, guilt,
yeah.
you white guilt piece of shit.
By the way, you just reminded me. I really remember Moishi, like Rabbi Moishi's son, the blonde one.
You hate him.
I hate that kid.
Yeah.
I hate that kid so much. Such a
Yeah.
piece of shit.
Oh yeah.
Such an orthodox little pompous douchebag.
Oh yeah.
I want to beat him up.
I've been there. Just jump him.
X gonna give it to you.
Oh god. That's genius. I might have to do more editing on the
On this one?
on this one.
Yeah.
I don't
You
know.
actually edit
Should-
these?
Yeah.
Nice.
Should I?
You
No.
know what you should do? I wanted to say, but we should.
What should we do?
We can get a mics. We can get mics. We can make a
proper
serious
mics.
podcast. We can make it like.
I have a really nice mic at home. It's a Blue Snowball.
So why don't we do
Yeah.
it? You have already 2 chapters. We can do like a whole thing.
Yeah. We have 2 chapters now after this one, but
Put it on Spotify. Boom. Spotify rich.
we can do a
Man.
Spotify. But we're starting from then chapter 3, I guess, on
Viewership.
Spotify. But I was thinking that we even do like
Just pause
camera, and like the podcast we can have like one on YouTube and one on Spotify. But the one on YouTube will just be like this, like just showing you, I guess, and then have like people maybe talking. I don't know. Is that better, or should we have no camera? I don't know.
No camera.
No camera.
No camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, just have it like.
I would
This
never
isn't
just wanna
Joe
watch Bobby. Can you imagine? You'd
I was-
kill
I-
yourself.
I-
No,
Yeah.
it's fun. I feel like it'd be fun, like just to watch Bobby like this, you know? Like I don't know.
Everything's going on. No offense to Bobby though. If it were me or you, it doesn't matter. Just like, am I watching? But on like Spotify, it's different.
Yes. Yeah.
You just like
I
put it
mean-
in your pocket.
It's done.
Listen
You
to a
don't
bunch
care.
after.
I'm personally really annoyed when I listen to Joe Rogan and I see the little screen moving. I'm like, I don't want that.
Really?
I'm particularly.
Really? No, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do so when I'm like at home. I'll watch it, but like,
Who
Yeah.
watched this 3 hours?
yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Nobody watched.
No,
this
but
3
some
hours.
people do it where like they're all in a room, you know, like sometimes with the podcast, and then there's like a camera, and it shows like the people doing the podcast.
No, I'm saying watching a podcast. Like just the act of watching
Some people
a
do
3-hour
it.
podcast is just.
Yeah, it's stupid.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I also
Listening to
agree.
it is fun.
Yeah,
Over
yeah,
like-
listening to it's fun. Yeah, I listen to it. I listen to podcasts in the car. I love
Did you
it.
listen to Rolling Alone?
No, not yet. Did you?
should, yeah. It's
Is it
amazing.
crazy? Is
Yeah,
it
it's
crazy
great.
stuff?
It's not crazy, but it's good.
Okay, but am I editing like this out? Like, am I editing?
Yes,
am I
yes,
cutting
yes,
this?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
but what do I consider cut? Because I always love keeping stuff like this.
No,
Who listens to this? Like 10, 15 people?